My name is Harley Moore Wilson. I work for the Native Agriculture Financial Services. We are a other lending institution for Native American agriculture. And on the other side, we do a lot of education components. And so today we'll be doing a webinar over the pasture, rangeland, and forage insurance, crop insurance. And we are really glad to be able to provide this webinar through the grant funding from the Southern Risk Management Education Center. Uh, Extension Risk Management Education provides resources, trainings to assist farmers and ranchers to help navigate those uncertainties in agricultural production, such as risk. We look at different things such as weather fluctuation, market fluctuation, financial stability, legal issues, human issues. Today, specifically, we will be utilizing this webinar to help agriculture producers understand how to work with a crop insurance agent and to view an example of implementing crop insurance on a real life piece of property and how beneficial that can help an operation. We're really excited to host this webinar and give you a chance to ask your questions directly to our crop insurance agent, Mr. Les McGee. Um, Another couple of little things, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. I will be monitoring both of those as Les is going through the presentation and through the examples. But at the end, after the presentation and the example is over, I will be able to provide everybody the opportunity to promote everybody to speak. So you will have the option to ask questions if you're more comfortable asking questions that way. And after this meeting is over, be watching for an email from me. Anybody that's registered will get a link to this recording so that you can share this recording with your friends if you find it very helpful. There will also be contact information for Mr. Les. If you want to follow up with him after the presentation is over, feel free to do that. And I gladly will connect you also. With that, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Les McGee. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to a great presentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm sharing my screen now. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it.
You can see it. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Les McGee, and there's some information about me and my company and how you can reach me. I'm a Cherokee citizen, Tarot certified with the Cherokee Nation, and I own an insurance company that helps in lots of different ways. This particular one is one of my favorites because I love helping ranchers and save money. And this product, when I saw it 7 or 8 years ago, just blew me away that I could help with this benefit. So don't know if you know much about this particular piece as far as PRF, pasture, range, and forage, but it is an amazing product that's tied to rainfall. The company that I use is Sylvius Insurance Group. That's what I'm a part of. And the reason I like being part of this group is because they use data to be able to help make choices when it comes to this pasture, range, and forage. So we've got data that's tied to rainfall on whatever piece of ground we're looking at, all the way back to 1947. So when we're looking at making choices on what to cover and coverage percentages, we're actually looking at real-time data and helping make better choices overall. So we'll get into this, and I love questions, so feel free to ask. As I move through this, there's a short presentation by PowerPoint, and then I'm going to show you a real-world example where I know I'll answer more of the questions that you're probably going to have at the end. Whatever you've got after that, we'll cover. So pasture, range, and forage, it's rainfall index coverage. It's a federally subsidized index program offered by RMA, designed specifically for hay and livestock producers. So this is only on your grazing ground and hay ground, and you do have to own a cow in order to qualify. You can own more than that, but that's what it takes. Okay. So there's 9,000 of these NOAA weather stations across the country. And what they do is they triangulate your property and they get rain data from those weather stations to create indexes to be able to do this index, to be able to do this insurance. So it's impossible to accurately monitor the precipitation on every ranch actually received in the system, but it is possible to create an index and monitor the precipitation in areas receiving relative to history. So what they do is they use this thing called a grid, and I'll show this to you. Standard, yeah, tough word to say. So basically what they do is they use the Doppler data participation totals to incorporate into smoothing methods for each grid. So looking at this grid, let's say this is your piece of property in this top right corner. Let's say your ranch or farm is up here in this top right corner. It may not rain here. It may rain down here in this bottom left-hand corner. What they do to make it even and equitable for everyone, they take whatever rain amount fell during that participation and they smooth it out and they spread it out all over that grid. So that may be really wet down here, but it still counts inside of this grid as far as the rainfall is concerned. Same with snow. So it's like the snow melts, everybody gets the same smoothed out participation across the grid. The grids are 17 by 17 miles. So that's what a grid is. And they're all numbered across the United States. So this is how we find your property and find out what the rainfall is inside of that grid. Okay. And they're all numbered. So there's two types of coverage on your pasture and on your hay. And those are the only two things that we're focused on. Coverage is available for perennial forage. Coverage values are based on estimated range values set by FSA. And I'll show you that in the example here in a minute of those calculations set by FSA. If you've got pasture and hay, as long as the pasture land, as long as it's something that you can keep cattle out of and you can run implements across and you can hay it, then it can be counted as hay coverage areas. Okay. It's another question I get a lot of times. And there's different trigger levels. So it's based on rainfall. So they look at what's called intervals. And I'll show you that here in a minute. January, February, March. And they look at what the rainfall is during those intervals and then trigger levels based on 85%, 80% of whatever the rainfall is during that interval cycle. And that'll make sense when we get into the example so you can actually see it in real live scenarios. And there's a production factor. We can use a production factor from 60 all the way up to 150% of coverage value. And what that does is that helps us to set a price for you to whatever you're okay with being exposed to as far as your indemnity is concerned. And I'll show you some more about this here in a minute, and I'll be able to answer more of those questions when we get into the real live example. So what we like to do is spread coverage out throughout the year. So let's say you've got grazing and hay. So grazing, January, February, March, you can see these intervals. You can't choose two intervals back to back to place coverage on. You have to have a separation between intervals. So these two intervals, as we look at this and when we see the real live example, it'll be more clear. But January, February, March, a lot of times are notoriously dry in areas. You can't choose that back to back in a grazing scenario. You have to alternate the intervals. Okay. So what we like to do is if you've got grazing and hay ground, we like to spread things out and overlap. So we could choose grazing here and hay here if we wanted to. Grazing here, hay here, and spread out percentages across these different intervals to come up with what your insurance would cost. And you'll see more examples of that whenever we get into the presentation as far as the real live scenario, okay? If decreasing rainfall is a risk for your operation, you're covered. The great thing about this is it's not something you're going to get rich on, but what it does is when it's dry and we've got intervals chosen, it helps to fill the gap. So it's a good coverage for you, but it's not going to make you rich. So if it's dry, it's going to help cover whatever your inputs are that you need to cover. It'll cover hay if you've got to go purchase hay. It's affordable, it's flexible, and it's simple. And the difference about Sylvius and what we get to do you want an order taker or a specialist? And that's one of the things that we look at when we are helping people. We really drill down and find out, and you'll see that here in a minute in this real world example. We really look at what that piece of property can do, and then we look what it could do over the last 10 years. And a lot of times, well, everyone I talk to and I do one of these presentations for, I say, look, don't get mad at me when we look at this and we look back 2 or 3 years, all the way back through 10 years and go, why didn't you come see me 10 years ago? Because of the potential of what this can do as far as when it's dry and what it can pay. So we really drill down and we like to be specialists. We just don't take orders from people. So we're about service. Why you should use us from other agents? Because we use data and we really drive down and help people figure out what's best for their situation. And that's what we do. And we do that with the software that we have. And I'm going to let you guys see into the software and see how it works from start to finish. And when I sit down with the producer, I always do this with them so they can see how this works, ask the questions that they need to ask for clarity, and to make sure they're making a good decision and they're fully invested in what they have and understand it completely. So that's what we do. So sign up deadlines for crop 26. We've got to have applications in by 12/1 of 25. Premiums are, and this next part, premiums are due September 1st of the following year, if not paid by indemnity first. And I'll cover that because this is subsidized. You don't have to pay for this policy up front. It can pay for itself before the due date. And then it continues to pay even after. What we need to do is map our boundaries of rangeland are needed to provide for recommendations. We like to see 578s so we can map and grid exactly where your property is to make sure that we get everything in place like it's supposed to. And we can be audited in these policies as well. So we always like to have a copy of lease agreements. If you've got lease land, if it's owned land, we don't have to do that. But if you've got lease property, we've got to have copies of lease agreements that go in with applications. And the applications are pretty simple. So again, if you consider PRF, you need to treat it like a program. Adjust the cost point where it fits your budget. It will work over time. And what that means is we like to look at this over a 3 to 5 year period. And you'll see in the example that we're going to do in this real live example that sometimes 2 years out of 5, you may end up paying a portion, because we never know what rainfall is going to do. So we look at it in a 3 to 5 year increments. One of the things I always talk to my producers is if you've got a good year and you've got extra money and you can set that aside for a year that it's going to be rainy and you've got to pay that premium, set it aside so you've got it ready for you if you can do that. Because there will be a year that you've got to pay. So that's it as far as this part of the presentation. That's a little bit more of my information as far as who I am and what I do. And now we'll go into a real live example and look at how this works. Okay. Carly, are there any questions so far?
I have not saw any questions yet.
Oh, hopefully we still have folks on here. So what you're looking at right now is you are inside of my Sylvius range calc system. And this is what I do for every producer whenever I sit down with them to help them with what we have. So what I do is I put in an address for what we're looking for, and it's going to give me the location and the grid. So we're going to look at this real quick. So it gives me the grid, the county, and where that is located in the grid. So inside that 17 by 17 mile grid, this is where this property is, okay? And we can drill down further and we can actually look at it if you want to. When I sit down with producers, sometimes they do, but these are the numbers that I'm looking for, the grid ID number and the county. So I'm going to turn this off and we're going to build a plan for this place. So we can do this all across the United States. You can see all the states are listed. Osage. Takes just a second for it to bring things in. So there's lots of different grids inside of this county. So I've got to go and find the right one. 19635.
You do have a question on how do we get to this program? Is this a program that only you have access to, or is this a program that is available for anybody?
That's a great question. It's proprietary for Sylvius, for this company, and being a licensed agent, I'm allowed to go and build a plan. So if you want me to do this for your property, I'd be glad to. We can do this all over the United States. So you can't have access unless you're a licensed agent and are appointed with the company, but I can do this with you so you can see exactly what it looks like. So we're going to look at these. That's a great question. So this is grazing, and we're going to turn this to hay. And let's see, we had 40 acres to work with. So I'm just setting this up. And this is different for everybody's situation. So what I'm telling the system is we've got 40 acres to work with, and we're going to put 20 acres in hay and 20 acres in grazing. And RMA in that county right now, that grazing land is worth $37.40. The hay ground is worth $204 based on RMA. Okay. So now we're going to go and look at rainfall. And the first time I saw this, this just blew my mind that I could actually go back to 1947 and see what the rainfall was on this piece of property and how it would affect a plan we put together. So it's bringing these together. So red is always going to be grazing in this situation. Blue is going to be the hay. We're going to switch this to 10 years because we want to look at realistic numbers. The last 10 years are really what we want to look at. And I'm going to do the same thing with the grazing. If my program will keep up. There we go. So now we're on the hay side of what we're going to do. And what this does is this shows us, oh, it's going to be difficult. Bear with me just a minute. I don't know what it's doing. Okay. So if we look at this, if we look at these intervals, January, February, March, we can look in 2024 all the way back to 2015, and it shows when this would have paid in the months that it was dry. Everywhere that there's nothing in one of those boxes, it was wet and it was over the 85% number. Because we like to use this 85% as a trigger, because that's where it pays the best most of the time. We can look at a lot of different ones, but this is pretty much where we leave this 95% of the time. So when we look at this, this shows 40% of the time in January, February over the last 10 years. If we put $1 up, it's going to pay you $1.68. 60% of the time in February, March, it's going to pay you $1.63. In March, April, that same dollar, 60% of the time is going to pay you $2.24. So as you look down through here at these percentages, it gives us really good data on where we want to place percentages so that we maximize the dollar that we're putting towards the policy. Make sense? So as we look at this, I did this before, and I'll show you how this looks. So we're going to put 30% here. And this is where someone like me, this is where I get to put these plans together and help maximize this. With other companies, they don't have the data that we have. So a lot of times they just come through here and they do like 20% across the board, and it doesn't maximize the potential money that you can make out of the policy. So as you can see, I'm putting different percentages in each one of these, but we want to capture as many of these different intervals as we can, because again, you just never know what's going to happen with the rainfall. And this isn't a really good one. That's why we only put 10%, but there's times that it does pay. And again, we never know what Mother Nature is going to do. So with that button, we've got 100% coverage across all those. I come back. All right, it's going to think a second. You fill these in, and then I'll show you how this looks, okay? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask while I'm just doing this little busy work?
I'm not seeing any questions right this minute, but I did want to say, like, this is my piece of property. So this is a real world example for 40 acres that will have cattle and hay on them. And so I thought it was a really interesting example that I learned a lot from. And I hope you guys are able to get some good information out of this.
And I put my data in incorrectly, so I'm having to go back in and change this. So I put them in backwards. I wasn't even paying attention to the color, so I apologize, but you're seeing how this works. Okay, so that gives us 100%. So what happens now is if we look down here, let me close this. I put all my percentages in. We can go back to that if you've got questions. But if we look at what this policy is going to look like, basically the exposure for these 40 acres, 20 on grazing and 20 on hay, It'd be $474 a year is all her exposure would be. And then we can look at rainfall. So hopefully you can see this right here. We got rain data as far as yesterday. So this system updates us. We're usually 2 days behind, sometimes a day behind, but we're extremely accurate in our representation of real live situations. So as we look at this, I'm going to talk about grazing. The same thing applies over here. If you're looking at rainfall and how things have fallen during January, February, the average rainfall was 3.1 inches during that interval. During February, March, it was 4.63, 6.55. So respectively, you can see how the rainfall changes and it tracks that throughout the year. The next one over is how much it actually rained. It rained 31% of the 85%. So it rained 1.35 inches, and we didn't have anything in this particular interval. We had it in hay. It would have paid $330.48 back towards this policy to cover this $474. In February, March, it was at a 51% of the 85%. So it paid her $111.43 back towards the policy. Okay. So that's why we cross things up the way we do, is because we want to catch as many of these cycles as we can so that we maximize the coverage area and spreading and smoothing things out. If you're in multiple counties across multiple grids, it makes it even better. And the more land we put in, the more these numbers work to your advantage, especially when it's dry, because you can see here in Oklahoma, in Osage County, right where that property is, the first 2 months it was dry. And then look what happened. It started raining. So it's not paying. So she's getting the production that she needs out of her grazing ground and her hay ground, but it's wet. And then when it starts to turn off again, like right here in July, August, it was 74.4% of the 85% trigger. It still paid $64.74 back towards this policy. Okay. August, September is the same. And we can go in here currently, I hit this umbrella button, and we can see right now on that piece of property, it's rained 1.99 inches out of the average of 7.12. And we don't have very many days left in October. So the odds of this paying for the September, October are really high. October, November is even looking good as far as being dry, but we're calculating that out and looking at it currently. So we can kind of do a hypothetical if it's 40%, if it doesn't rain much more and it's 40% of the 85 in September, October, she's going to be in the black, $929.89 if we have this policy in place. So these numbers finalize at the end of the month, and we send out reporting documents to all our producers so they know where they are all the time. I call and talk to them and let them know kind of where we are. The last 5 days of the month, I don't talk to my producers because we never want to. I don't like to necessarily jinx things, but if there's no rainfall, we just wait until the first of the month and then we talk about where we are. But that's how the policy pays. So her exposure is only $474. And if it comes like this, like if that's where we are right now, she'd be in the black, $929.98, with still 2 more intervals to go for the rest of the year.
Les, can you describe a little bit about the 100% when you're trying to choose months I don't know if that's a really good question.
Yeah, just a minute. Let me bring it back up again. Okay, so we'll go back into the scenario. It's a little slow sometimes letting me get this set how I want it. So bear with me just a minute while I do this. So how do we decide? For me personally, in 7 years, I've looked at lots and lots of different ground, lots and lots of different rainfall. And that's where my expertise comes in, is helping to choose percentages to see what is going to optimize this policy for my producers. So that's really what you get me for, is to be able to put this together. What I've learned over time is, even when there's situations like, let's say this one right here, in June, July, odds are it's not going to pay. But the one time that I don't have a percentage in there, and my producer's like, why didn't we have that covered with something? Because look, it would have paid this year, or in 2024, it would have paid. It doesn't pay as frequently, but if we miss intervals of opportunity, I learned we need to put percentages in there, because there's a chance that it can pay really well. So that's what we do. Like in this one right here, it doesn't pay very often. It's really wet in October, November, but when it does pay, it can pay really well. So we try to spread that out the best that we can. And I don't want to take and just like stack, if I can keep from it, stacking a lot of percentage in November, December here, and then in the hay side, unless the rest of the year is really poor. We really look at spreading things out to hedge our bets, basically, so that your dollar is working the best it possibly can when we're waiting on it to be dry. And I hear this a lot from my producers. I would rather it rain and I have to pay this, because I'm getting everything I need out of my property. And then when it's dry, they're like, I'm so thankful I've got this. So, there's a balance of that. But we want to look at it over a 3 to 5 year, like I said, period. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you, I worked up a scenario for her to show what this would, if I can get this to drag and drop, here it comes, of what this would have done over the last 10 years. So in 2024, that same $474, been in the black, $709. In 2020, you can see this all the way down. In 2022, it was really dry in that grid. It paid her really well. In 2020, she would have paid a portion of it. It rained a little bit, but she would have paid $355 when it was all said and done for that year. And in 2019, it would have cost her $25 to have it. And I have sat down with producers and we start this policy, and this is the first year, and they end up owing money. And I really stress to them, you really want to look at this in a 3 to 5 year cycle, because you'll be more ahead than you won't be based on the averages in rainfall. Because if you look at this out of 3 to 5 years, you're winning. You're winning. Does that make sense? So over a 10-year period, with this just sitting there, not doing anything at all, just having that $474 a year plan, it had paid $3,800, almost $3,900 back to you in a 10-year look back, just on 40 acres. And I've got producers that have thousands and thousands of acres, and their plans are extensive. They cover up multiple of my screens as we're looking at that. But we can help a small producer all the way up to producers that have thousands of acres. And I'll just kind of show you what this looks like if we change this to, let's change it to 500. Let's just say this was an example. We're going to change this to 500 of each. So if this was the case and you had 500 grazing acres and 500 hay acres, this would be your exposure for that policy, $11,871 a year. Right now, it would have put 23,000 back in your pocket this year alone. And you can see, in that example where we had the 40%, on the hay side, it pays a lot bigger numbers because the value of the hay ground is so much more. So we can go back and look at some of these other years. We'll go back to 24. This plan would have paid you $17,000. 23. It'd have paid you 13,000. I think 22 was a really dry year. It'd have paid you 31,000 to have this in place, if that was an accurate representation of your facility. 21 had paid you 6,100, and I'm looking right here at this number. I'm looking for a year that you had to pay. That scenario, it was 2020. Let me look at 2020. In this scenario, because of the hay ground and the way that was, in 2020 is where you owed money right there. So you would have had to pay $8,900 towards this plan because of how wet it was throughout the year. But the other years more than make up for that, 1 or 2 years. Does that make sense? Haley, any other questions that you can think of from the other day when we talked and I kind of showed this to you guys?
Yeah,
Anybody
the
else?
only other thing I would maybe describe is how you can't put a percentage on every single month under grassland or under haying, and that's why it's good to have that diversity. Maybe just do a little bit of description on that.
Bring this back up again. So one of the rules with PRF is you can't choose in hay or grazing, you can't choose back-to-back intervals. It won't let you. Let me get this to do what I need it to do. Just a second, I'll show you. The hay ground. Like right here, both of these are great intervals back to back. They pay really well. But if I try to come down here and I try to put in 10% here, it won't let me. It kicks me out of the other one that I'm next to. It will not let me choose a back-to-back interval if I'm in hay. If I'm in grazing, it's the very same thing. It makes me have this separation between. We could go like if this, we can play with lots of different numbers, and I can take this number up into bigger numbers. We could skip these two if we wanted to. This one's fairly decent. I mean, we can play with all sorts of different numbers. We can get lost in this. Just as long as this number ends up at 100%, it will allow me to look at the policy. Like in this one, I would never put more than 10% in this, but we want it because look at what that paid in 2022. It paid really, really well. So you want to have a little coverage in there. We could increase this.
And so the opposite months, so we're looking at hay right now, but you would want to put coverage on the opposite months in grazing so that you're getting covered for the full year. Is that correct?
Correct. And it's spreading your risk out over different intervals so that it's a better situation all the way around. So we have to reduce some of this to get to the 100%. Well, I can run different scenarios, but we optimize it from the beginning the best that we possibly can to make those choices. Like if that was the best scenario, we can look at that. We can look and see what that would pay over the last 10 years. But that's what I get to spend time doing is optimizing this the best that I possibly can. I'm a pretty technical person and I love breaking this stuff down. And if there's a producer that likes to look at that, it doesn't hurt my feelings at all because we can look at it. And the more they understand, the more comfortable they are, the better it is because then I know they understand this policy and they're not going to be worried when it's wet. They're going to be thankful when it's dry. But we'll spend as much time as somebody needs to understand it so that we can help them get this in place and get it implemented.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let promote people to talk. So maybe if they have
Sure.
questions, they'll feel more comfortable asking questions
Love
that
it. Yeah. And I love questions. There are no dumb questions at all.
Okay, all of our attendees should have the ability to take themselves off mute and ask questions if you have any questions. And I will put Les's email in the chat so that you guys have that again to be able to contact him if you have any questions. After this presentation is over, feel free to reach out there.
We've got about 17 minutes left. Feel free, like any questions. If somebody wants me to look at a scenario, we've got plenty of time to do one if somebody wants that done. If they're okay with us looking this up in front of everybody else. If not, be glad to do it one-on-one, whatever I need to do.
Hi, I showed up late. Is it okay if you guys do a sample?
Sure. We have time.
Yeah.
Make that go away. All right, what's an address?
Do 103 Walker Avenue, Burbank, Oklahoma.
That'll be a good one. Way up north. Up in the Osage. This is a good one. Looked at property up here before. Just jotting some information down real quick. So
Thank you for the really kind words, David. We really appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. And if you feel like you have something else to do, we'll just be going through a couple more examples here. So you can hop off at any time.
And if anybody has any questions as we do this, feel free. Does that look like where your
Yes.
property is somewhere?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And there's 20 acres here.
All grazing or grazing hay combination?
Yeah, I would do a grazing hay combination.
So it's got the same the same county base value, 3740 for the grazing and 204 for the hay. It's a good grid. The more of these that are in here, it's a good grid. So let's do 20 and 20 or 20 total.
It's 20 total.
20 total. How many of it is actually ground you can put hay on?
I would say 8 acres, so I would do 8 and 12.
If that picked it up or not, we'll see here in a second. So we'll look at this. August, September is really, really good. Acres, right? Stop. Sometimes I get a little click happy and it doesn't like it. So tells me I'm doing it wrong. So here it comes. So I typically start with the hay when I do this because the land value is so much higher. And this is a great one to have right here. So see, hit my 100%. So that's got off on my grids. So let's look at the grazing side. Okay. So it looks like the premium on this particular policy would be $197 a year. Okay. So where we are in 2025, let me change this, see if it'll keep up with me. Thinking. So right now, if you have this in place with the percentages and everything that we chose, this is where you would be right now. You'd be 213.09 to the black. As we look up through the year, it was really dry in January, dry in February, and then the rain came July, August, September, and you've got 3 more intervals to go for the year.
And so
Let's
what
see what
I'm
the rain.
seeing here, Les,
Yeah.
on that last screen, there wasn't enough, or maybe it just covered right before, is it June or July that you have to pay your coverage if it's not covering it?
By the end of June, they send you a bill to let you know that this is what you owe.
Oh, and it would just have
Remaining
covered
for
it
the
barely at 195 and 46. So it would have still been in the black. So you, on this particular piece of property, I would have not had to pay the premium because it would have paid for itself before the premium was due. Is that right?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So we go back to 24. It'll pay you $207. In 03, it'll pay you $334. We'll go down to when it was wet. Let's see what it looked like in 20. It'll cost you $54 in 20. $87 in 19. See, the rainfall was different in this. Look, you'd have been in 18, you'd have been $5.87 to the good.
And
So
did you describe how, well, this would have paid all of the money at the first of the year, but if there wasn't enough money to cover the premium by the end of June, you pay that what's left of the premium and then they cut checks to you yearly, monthly? How does that work?
they cut checks monthly after the end of the month settles and all the final rainfall calculations are tabulated. They send you a report and let you know exactly where you are and what you have left. And then they cut checks if there is a payment to be made.
Yes, ma'am. This recording and the slides will be provided via email. I'm gonna guess it'll probably be about tomorrow afternoon when I get the recording posted on YouTube and then onto our website so that I can send it out in a email. It will come from harley.moore@nativeagfinance which is the email that I've been sending out, the email blast per each webinar that we've been having. So I definitely will get this sent out.
So you can see this grid is a little bit different than the other. It's a good grid, but in 17, 18, 19, it was more wet in 17 as well. So every grid is different, and that's why we always go and look through the 10-year plan to see what it looks like. So as you can see, as we went through those, if you're looking at this number down here, that's all I was focused on, is looking at what this did over the last 10 years. I'll go back through them again, and you can see. More times than not, it's a positive situation. But again, you never can guarantee what Mother Nature is going to do. We just try to maximize our choices whenever we do this. I know somebody's got to have some questions. We got about 3 or 4 more minutes before the hour's up, to be respectful of everyone's time, and I don't mind answering any questions you've got. And I do not charge to do a plan for a piece of property. We don't charge for that. If we can help you, we want to. So we can set up a Zoom call, and we can do the very same thing personally if you'd like me to look at that. Doesn't matter what state you're in, we can look and see. So you can see it's overall, it's paid pretty well. I would consider this a good grid. Even though it's, you know, with 20 acres, it's still a good scenario.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really seeing any questions, but Les,
Okay.
if you want to maybe pop your information back up from your PowerPoint slide. Yeah, there you go. Here is Les's information if you guys happen to have any particular questions from today's webinar, or even if you would like to see a scenario run on your piece of property, feel free to reach out to him directly, or you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I guess I could go ahead and turn my video back on. I'm sorry that you're just I'm talking to a black screen. But really, we thank each and every one of you for joining us today. It's been such a great webinar. I learn a lot each and every time that I see this tool used. I think it's just really interesting and wonderful. So at this, I'm going to end the recording.